Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Church's 2030 conference. We are so excited to have you on this particular workshop session. So today we're going to dive into No More Excuses, busting myths and stereotypes about Black women, nutrition, and physical activity. We're going to address the many myths and mistruths about Black women's health, getting active, and provide resources and information on how we can live a healthy, sexy, fit life at any age. We want to learn how social run clubs like Black Girls Run and other community approaches to getting active serve to provide not only a physical benefit, but also support mental health and other psychological needs. So, again, we're so excited to have you. I want to first introduce myself. Thank you for joining us. My name is JL Alexander, and I'm the owner and CEO of Black Girls Run. We are a national running organization, and we're super excited to be invited to the Healthy Church's 2030 conference. Today, we have a very important discussion ahead of us, talking about Black women's health. We're super excited to have our dynamic panel and the opportunity to present this important information to the Healthy Church's 2030 conference. We want to remind you to stay tuned in. At the end of this session, we will have our very special guests live for a special Q&A. So let's dive in. Very often when we hear people talking about Black Girls Run, our mission, we very quickly find out that people want to know, well, how can we get the Black community healthier? We suffer from poor Black health statistics in terms of our health, Black women being at the top of the charts in terms of chronic diseases, and just our community as a whole. So we want to be a resource and a tool to change that narrative. So we're all aware of the daunting numbers, but today's discussion is really to uplift, bring some positive motivation to how we can take some takeaways to really empower our communities to become healthier. So we have two dynamic women joining us today. I want to welcome Stephanie Carter as well as Dr. Kathy Yeckel. Stephanie is a registered dietitian, and Dr. Kathy Yeckel is assistant professor of clinical public health at Yale School of Public Health. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So I'll go ahead and open it up to the floor to you guys to ask you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your story, and why did you get into health and fitness and wellness as a career? Go ahead, Stephanie, kick us off, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, JL. Well, hello, everyone. As JL mentioned, my name is Stephanie. I am a board-certified registered dietitian. I'm also a fitness professional and wellness entrepreneur. I currently run my own private dietetic practice in Los Angeles, California, called Carter Hall Lifestyle, where I specialize in metabolic health, digestive health, diabetes and heart health education, as well as performance nutrition. And my journey into becoming a dietitian actually took I would say, not a traditional route. I actually was an actor and a dancer in New York City, and I was quite successful, I'll say that. And but it really got to the point where I was really finding that I needed something more in life, something that I was really passionate about. And it was actually at that time that I found my faith. And I realized that those 10 producers behind that table were not dictating whether or not I was going to be happy in my life. So at that point, I really reached into my faith and decided that I knew I wanted to step into fitness. And it was an easy transition as a dancer. I'd always been interested in fitness, and it's something that is important to me in my career. So I decided to become that registered dietitian and moved to California and got my master's in nutritional science and clinical dietetics with God's help, obviously, because it was a struggle. But that definitely brought me to where I am now, serving my community, especially communities of color here in the Los Angeles area.
Nice. Well, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kathy, go ahead and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yes, as JL said, I am an assistant professor of clinical public health at the Yale School of Public Health. And I have a master's in exercise physiology, and I've always been interested in physio-metabolic puzzles. So this combining of nutrition and exercise. I am somebody that suffered from a chronic disease my whole life, so I have asthma, and that has really helped me to sort of find fascination and curiosity in triggers and what makes things worse in health and what makes things better. And although I didn't pursue asthma as my career focus, it's really helped me to define why sort of metabolic health puzzles are so important to figure out, and why support in communities is so fundamental to lifelong health. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, for both joining us today. We're super excited about our discussion. So we're just going to go ahead and hop right in. So we're going to share over our discussion, we're going to share some of the latest science on health for Black women and take a status check on Black women's health in America and provide you with some practical strategies of how you can take control of your own health and fitness journey. So first, diving into some holistic ways to improve health. Stephanie, just kind of laying a foundation. Very often when we talk about healthcare within the Black community, I know you have a personal story yourself with your mom, and especially in the social climate that we're in right now, why are we kind of scared to talk about health in the Black community? Like what the distrust that we have with the healthcare system. So kind of help us lay a framework of how we're kind of digging into and peeling back the layers with health and how it's framed in the Black community.
Yeah, thanks, JL. I mean, there is a level of mistrust that exists between the Black communities and the medical community. And I think that's because the Black community is really aware of this kind of inherent implicit bias that exists within the medical community. And in fact, even research shows that, put simply, people of color receive less care and sometimes even worse care than white Americans. The reasons for that include lower rates of health coverage, communication barriers, racial stereotyping based on false beliefs, a plethora of things, right? And it's really no wonder why the Black community is a little bit apprehensive about seeking treatment. But I will say that when we do go for treatment, we really try to seek out a medical provider that looks like us so that they understand our experience. But then we run into another unfortunate statistic, is that there are very few people of color in the medical community. In fact, there's less than 6% of physicians and surgeons in the U.S. identifying as Black. And for me specifically, out of 93,000 individuals registered as registered dietitians, only 2% are Black. That's me. I'm in that little bit of 2%. And that's really one of my driving forces as a dietitian. And in fact, my personal story, and I'm always happy to share it. At that point where I was deciding to kind of take a break on acting and being a dancer, I spoke to my mom about this transition, and she was, all for it. But at the time, my mom was actually dealing with some pretty significant health issues herself. She had adult onset diabetes, which, progressed into heart disease, and she actually died at age 54 of cardiomyopathy. So when we're trying to connect these two things, like mistrust, and then we look at my mother and it's like, how did someone at age 54 die of something so preventable as diabetes and heart disease? Like, where was that tether? And it's not like it wasn't there in the community, right? Like, or even in our family. My sister's a lawyer, and I'm a master's. I have a master's degree. My brother's an executive chef. So her support was there in the family, but I think there was a level of shame that my mother did not want to share with us, that she had adult onset diabetes and that it was actually getting uncontrolled and worse. So we are seeing that not only do we need the support of the medical community, but we need to be open ourselves in the Black community to go into our churches and into our schools and into our communities and say, hey, I have this disease and I really need some support. And for some reason, diabetes is just one of those things that we don't want to share. And, I myself as a dietitian, I try to get out there and say, hey, the more that we share our story and share our experiences and support one another, the more we can kind of drive down the statistic of, Black Americans dying of diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure, all preventable,
Yeah.
JL.
Yeah, absolutely. You just definitely hit it on the head. So Kathy, in terms of like the public health lens, how do we approach these statistics that seem so daunting in the Black community and kind of reframe the research to help be almost motivational for the Black community? What can we do kind of coming from the public health lens?
Yeah, those are really good questions, because I think we're at the point where we've been framing these statistics, as Stephanie has been, and you yourself have alluded to, the fact that we have very high rates of obesity and hypertension and type 2 diabetes in Black women in particular, and the Black population overall, that's an awareness piece that I think the way that we're trying to start to bring it into focus is the idea that, okay, while we know that, the individuals per se, maybe only, say it's 1 in 2 right now, which is the Black Women's Health Imperative in the American Heart Association. They're saying, okay, 1 in 2 Black women have this high risk of heart disease, but only 1 in 5 are sort of recognizing that. So how do we change the conversation so that everyone is sort of included in this knowledge base of nutrition and physical activity, so that the awareness becomes more about what can I do in a precautionary way, even if I have this or don't know if I have it. I think it really hits home to me, because somebody like me who had asthma, I could feel those symptoms. You can't feel hypertension. You can't feel high blood sugar. So it calls for action that speaks to how can we just not only build the awareness, but start to create steps and really in a precautionary way, so that we really activate the community around knowing and acting on better nutrition, knowing and acting on better physical activity, so that everyone becomes healthy, whether you have a health problem or not.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Before we kind of dig into kind of those steps that we can take to really start combating those statistics, Kathy, I know you shared with me some alarming statistics in terms of a particular age range right now that's kind of rearing its ugly head in terms of being the most unhealthy. And I think we can kind of take a little sidebar right now to kind of speak to that science that's out there.
Yeah, what they've been finding is that the fastest growing group is sort of that 18 to 35-year-old women. So women that are, starting their, still in school, starting their families, doing jobs, so that the focus has not been on their health per se. They're thinking, okay, I don't need to worry about this. That's for when you're older. So the idea that we're starting to have problems at younger and younger ages. I personally have done research studies where the participants have jumped in that are even younger, that are teenagers, and in the Black community. And when you already see insulin, that hormone insulin that's sky high to try to control blood sugar, it's sobering. And I love that they wanted to take part, and that's the first step, because then we can sort of try to re-engage the community. The UCAN is one of our sponsors today. They are founded on this product that is this innovative energy. It's natural food, this super starch that is it's basically this time release of glucose to support the blood sugar. So it's the awareness that we can make steps. We can change the way we eat, even food order, to lower the problem with, say, sky high blood sugar. But it's at all ages now. So it really is quite sobering.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, when you're kind of working with your clients, if you will, what is kind of your approach to wellness, or talking to Black women specifically about kind of changing their behavior when it comes to food and physical activity?
Yes. Well, I take a holistic approach in my private practice. So I don't just speak about nutrition. It's also fitness. It's also self-care, mental health. So that's really important. But just going back to one thing that Kathy said, Dr. Yeckel said, is that um, the way that we can decrease this incidence is really bringing in our communities. And I think in the Black community, we have a lot of cultural foods and a lot of cultural cuisines that it's hard for someone in that 18 to 35 age range. When your mom is cooking and your aunties are cooking, it's really hard to pull yourself away from those foods. So you almost can't do it alone. So if you go to sit at the table and you're like, oh, well, I just saw, Miss Carter today, and she recommended I'm mindful of my starches. And then the cornbread is there, and the peas are there, and all the really great foods are there. It's really challenging. So it has to be a community approach. So when I work with clients, it's not just about like a one-on-one approach. It's like, okay, well, where's your support? Whether it's your church or your friends, and if the support's not there, well, then I'm your support. You can text me at any time. So it's managing that first. That piece is super crucial. But then, like I said, it's also getting active, right? And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's super important. And then also just really, especially right now during COVID-19, managing our mental health. And we are seeing in Black communities the toll that is being taken on us right now with COVID and the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and just everything that's happening right now. So it's saying, I'm taking time for myself today, and I'm going to take care of my mental health, because all of that feeds into whether or not we're going to see an increased risk of chronic disease.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy we're having this conversation, less than 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So this will be a gentle reminder for some people to hold back on the salt and hold back on the extra serving. Let's hope that this conversation serves well for the holidays as well. But shifting gears a little bit, we'll start digging back and talking about just moving into fitness. I know, Kathy, we talked about, especially during COVID-19, you and your husband getting out and walking to the block, down the street, down the block, just to get some type of physical activity. I know, Stephanie, you mentioned, not going to the gym, but making sure that you get up from your desk and make sure that you're being active, that you kind of set a routine. What are some tips that you can give us about getting physically active, especially for some people that may have sedentary lifestyles? What would be some tips? And even during COVID-19, we might find ourselves more sedentary than usual. What would be some tips that you would give people just to get started? And I open that question to either of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to talk about fitness right now, because it's super important now that we are so sedentary. And I think the first thing that we can do is really stand in our truth, like real talk. What can we really fit in our day? And what can we be motivated to do? Because I have so many clients where I see that they're not physically active. And my initial instinct isn't to say, okay, buy the resistance bands, get the weights, get the sneakers, get all the things. It's like, okay, realistically, you maybe have kids or you have this job that's super demanding. What can you realistically do and fit it into your life, and start there? And a lot of times I'm finding that there's actually no motivation to work out. So something like Black Girls Run, that organization is great, because when you can get in a community of people, they're holding you accountable to you working out versus, oh, I know I should go for a walk right now, but it's like your girl called you and it's like, hey girl, come on, it's time. This is our daily walk. And I think that having that support is really important. But also, like I said, just getting real with yourself on what you realistically can do in your day, and not trying to run a marathon right away, or try to, I know here in California, gyms aren't open, so you're not going to a gym anyway, but just really simple things. First thing I always recommend is trying to get in a 30-minute walk. And then from there, if you can add in that 1 minute of a jog, so maybe you walk for 5 minutes and then you jog for a minute. You do that for 30 minutes, right? And then maybe as that jog starts to feel good to you, you decrease the walk by a minute and you increase the jog by 1 minute. And before you know it, you're jogging for 30 minutes. But it's gradual and you're not pushing yourself. It feels nice and it feels good in your body. And you're like, wow, I just did that. I crushed the thing, right? So I think that's where you should start with fitness and not trying to, be Serena Williams, because it took a while for her to get there too.
Right, exactly. Kathy, what suggestions can you offer us for kind of breaking this sedentary lifestyle?
Yeah, and first, just to follow up what Stephanie just said, I mean, there's some great community work that was done, because there's always been this struggle between, well, do we need everyone to be, go to the heart station and make sure everything is okay? And what they did was they took a fairly large group of people, and this was both the Black and the white communities in the South, and I'm sorry, in Michigan actually, and they said, okay, can we just have people sort of do a contract of 30 minutes, just like Stephanie was saying, and progressively build to that 30 minutes? And I mean, it really is remarkable. Not only did they improve blood pressure and waist circumference and, their body weight, but they had more energy. They had, they slept better. They had more functional movement. And so it sort of spoke to the fact that we can, even as a community, just sort of embrace this the opening up our gyms and things to people to actually start to do this kind of activity. And of course, right now, maybe not opening gyms, but to get people out in the neighborhood for walks and these kinds of things. I'm a huge fan. I mean, as you said, JL, noticing that all of a sudden I wasn't walking to commute, you have to build things in. So I walk around the block really quickly in the morning. I try to go out at lunchtime. I'm somebody who's run for decades and decades, so I like to do that too. But I notice how sedentary, and it's really good for all the listeners to realize that it's not just increasing movement from an exercise perspective. Even these tiny movements matter. The quick trips up and down the stairs, the get up and get down from your desk, it really does matter. In fact, the American College of Sports Medicine acknowledges now that it doesn't even need to be sort of that 10 minutes and greater of activity, that we can make a difference just being more active during the day. And I don't think we can diminish that. It's really important that is sort of on top of this growing need to add in exercise.
Absolutely. I think you all both definitely just hit it on the nose in terms of we don't have to go out here and feel like we have to run a marathon tomorrow, but it's just about the movement. And we definitely talk about that a lot within Black Girls Run. A lot of people get very intimidated when they were like, well, do I already have to be a runner to come out to run with you guys? And we're like, no, we meet you where you are, but we just want you to get out and to move and just get the blood flowing just to start your health and fitness journey. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about nutrition, and something that we all love is in terms of food. And we know that we can't outrun a bad diet. So we have to talk about what's going on in our kitchens, and how we're preparing food, how we're digesting food, and so forth. So one thing that I want to hit on is hunger cues. Especially, sitting behind a computer, sometimes boredom can sometimes become equivalent to let me go find some snacks. So how do we, follow, I guess, carefully and correctly follow those hunger cues, and just to keep us healthy while we're kind of in this sedentary type of climate?
Yeah, first off, hunger cues are really big, right? And especially now when we are boredom eating, emotional eating, listening to your hunger. And it's hard. If you've never done it before, it is really hard to really think about, am I hungry right now, or am I just eating because I'm bored, right? Or I just need to get up from my desk. And I was like, oh, the kitchen's right there, so I'm just going to grab some Cheez-Its or something like that. So, I always tell people to do a check-in before they eat. eat. And if you think of a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being Thanksgiving full, which we're going to try not to do this year, right? And 1 being I'm starving, we know that. We want to be somewhere between the 3 and 7 range. So 3 and 4, you're getting these mild signals. Leptin, that's the hormone that tells you you're ready, or sorry, ghrelin is telling you that you're ready to eat, right? It's sending that signal. You can think ghrelin GER, that's how I always remember it. And it's sending you these signals that you're ready to eat. And then as you're eating, you're taking 20 minutes, right? Not woofing it down. A lot of times we eat so quickly that it doesn't even, our gut and our brain don't even have time to communicate and say, hey, I'm good, right? You don't have to send any more, right? And so if you wait that 20 minutes and you mindfully eat your snack or your meal, then leptin, that's the hormone that tells you you're done, it'll come into play. Now, what happens if you're experiencing cravings, which that's what boredom eating is, it's meaning something's up with your metabolism. So I always use this acronym called SHMEC, sleep, hunger, energy, mood, cravings. And so if you're having something going on with your SHMEC, and your SHMEC's out of check, then that means something's going on with your metabolism, right? And that could mean that you're not getting enough sleep, which we'll probably talk about later. And so leptin and ghrelin, they're not getting that chance to regenerate overnight. If you're experiencing a lot of hunger, or your mood's all over the place and you're fighting with your husband or your kids or your wife, then you know that's something going on with your metabolism. So it's important that you take that 20 minutes to really assess your hunger fullness cues and, okay, yeah, I am actually really hungry, but then also build in a snack or a meal that's complete. So you want to look for a snack, something that's a protein and a complex carbohydrate and a healthy fat. And then for your meal, you want to have half your plate be non-starchy vegetables, quarter of your plate a complex carbohydrate, or you can do a starchy veg in that area. And then a quarter of your plate is some sort of clean protein, and the whole thing is cooked, or you have some healthy fat in there. And that's going to provide you satiation, and it'll keep your blood sugar actually even if you're eating every kind of 3 to 4 hours and not giving into those cravings. Because that's when we're going to see issues with prediabetes, and I could go into the whole science of it, but let's just say your pancreas gets tired of sending insulin out, and your brain goes, why is insulin always hanging around? Because you're eating all the time, and insulin becomes this friend that you never invited to the party, but always is up, right? And so it doesn't really recognize insulin, and so then your glucose just sits in your bloodstream, and that's how that diabetes happens. So we don't want to be eating every 1 to 2 hours these unbalanced snacks. We want to be eating every 3 to 4 hours, making sure it's balanced, listening to our hunger fullness cues. It'll keep us satiated, it'll keep our blood sugar even, and just keep us happy throughout the day. But just, think about insulin, it's your friend, but it won't be your friend if you're eating all the time.
I understand that. So, Kathy, I remember us talking about a study that was done in kind of the southern area, talking about like soul food. Can you talk about that study was done in terms of how food is prepared, and I guess healthier ways that we can prepare our foods that will directly translate into just Black women's health overall?
Yeah, I think that, one of the big studies that came out was showing that, 40% of hypertension is associated with food at this point in Black women. So there is this strong need to start to realize, and actually the global burden of disease at this point, food is outranking smoking, if you can believe it, in terms of chronic disease. So in the main things are whole grains, not getting enough of them, too much salt, right? Too little fruits and vegetables, but fruits in particular in this case, as they've itemized it out, and then you sort of more nuts and seeds and more fiber. So all of these, that's like astounding, right? To think that these food items are outranking smoking at this point from a chronic disease perspective. And so this in Southern cooking, where it really speaks to the fact that we have to start to think about how can we enjoy the same foods, but start to modify them just slightly. This is where the knowledge comes in. This is where Stephanie's creative, intuitions can start to come into play in terms of how do we modify that? It's the DASH diet, right? How do we start to lower the salt and lower some of the saturated fats and these kinds of things in some of the wonderful Southern cooking meals that retains the culture, retains the flavor, but starts to lower the problem with the disease and the pervasiveness of the problem. And as Stephanie was talking about, sort of exercise and insulin sort of being the uninvited guest because it hangs around, and therefore the blood, and when people become resistant to it, their blood sugars are hanging around. I think it's really good to understand that some of the research that we're seeing right now is that women, Black women in particular, have a harder time burning fat. The muscle is not working as well to burn fat, and it is helped by exercise. But the minute you start to have insulin around, you are going to shut that off. So the idea that you keep putting in these fast carbs and things that are going to hit your system hard and pop up your blood sugar, it's making it even worse, because there's no way you're going to burn fat under those conditions. And it's why UCAN started to come on as a beautiful tool to use. The superstarch is very slow, so it helps various communities really start to empower their own metabolism. It's sort of the stealth. You want to be stealth about your metabolism so that your body can decide what it wants to burn and be more effective at burning off, particularly fat stores that are such a problem. So, yeah.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think when we talk about burning fat, it's important to know. I think a lot of people know, they've seen in articles, boost your metabolism, eat these foods, right? Boost your metabolism by eating this. The metabolism actually doesn't work that way, right? We actually want our metabolism to be adaptive or flexible, so that during the day it's using the glucose or the food that you're eating, right? And at night it's getting into fatty acid oxidation or ketosis and using fat as fuel. And the way to do that, going back to hunger and fullness, if you're snacking all day long into the night, into maybe 11 or 12, you have a glass of wine, and then that leads to the popcorn, and then maybe you have two more. Before you know it's 10 or 11, and that's the last time you had a bite. But then now let's look at how you started your day. Okay, I got to get up and feed the kids. I got to, get ready for work, even though if it's only a small couple steps to your desk now. But maybe you have that first cup of coffee or breakfast at 7 a.m. You didn't give your metabolism enough time to switch over from using glucose and finish using the glucose that you ate and what it has stored, to switching over to using fat as fuel. So when we talk about hunger and fullness and not eating every 1 to 2 hours, it's really important to, as Dr. Yeckel said, to really think about those fast carbs we're eating, and eating, more of those complex carbohydrates, so beans and legumes and whole grains, brown rice, brown processed. And listen, I know it's tough. That's not exactly how you want to kick it with your meal, and I know. So you want to think about your day and not just about one meal. So let's say one meal had, you did let's say a burrito with white rice, and it had whatever you maybe get from Chipotle. That does not mean your whole day is just a mess. You just look at the rest of your day and say, okay, I had, this carbohydrate that hit my bloodstream, and it's going to, if I'm not active, it's going to get stored right away. So I'm just going to, maybe for dinner, not have that type of carbohydrate at dinner. So you're not depriving yourself of that food, right? So every 3 to 4 hours, and then allowing 10 to 12 hours at night to fast, so your body can do what it does and switch into that fatty acid oxidation and burn fat as fuel. And as Dr. Yeckel said, it's hard as women. We're meant to have babies. God put us on this earth to have babies. So if I've never been pregnant, I mean, maybe someday, God willing, but when you're pregnant, and JL, because you have twins, right?
No, I just had my son a year ago.
Oh, just the son. Oh, who said somebody had twins? I don't know who those
Pam had twins.
Oh, twins. Okay, right. So then, when you're pregnant, your baby uses the glucose and you're using the fat on your body. So we're meant to keep fat on, especially around our hips and thighs. So we're fighting that, right? So it's really using your diet in a smart way, but not in a restrictive way.
I get it. Now, I know people.
But it works with exercise too. So the idea that you can burn, even if you make a simple switch in terms of the carbs at breakfast, if you go with the muesli versus the cornflakes, we know that 3 hours later, if you were to exercise at lunchtime, you're going to burn twice as much fat because you've made that choice. So the idea that you can have tricks in your day to help, if that's a goal that you have, is pretty astounding. So it is learning, and the knowledge base is key. It's starting to figure out quality of nutrients and timing of nutrients to make the most out of your day, which I think is just fantastic.
Good. Now, I felt, Stephanie, you read my entire life with that wine and popcorn comment. So, like, is she peeking into my window? Like, how did she know what I had last night? So, no judgment zone. Good stuff. So, our last 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about some lifestyle tips that we can really use. We've talked about fitness, we've talked about health and nutrition, and we've laid a framework of where Black women's health is now and things that we can do to improve. But obviously, we're in a very peculiar new normal in terms of what our social climate is, in terms of the pandemic that's happening right now. So I definitely want to add some practical takeaways for our viewers about some ways that we can lower stress. But then also, as Stephanie mentioned, self-care is a part of that holistic approach to wellness and health. So Stephanie, kick us off. What are some ways that we can lower stress and the effects that stress has on the body? And I was this is a sidebar, I said in the training this past weekend, and they could say stressors doesn't have to always be, the news or what's going on in our lives. It can be some things that we don't realize how stress on our body. So if you could talk about just kind of what things we can do to lower our stress and the impact that it has on us as individuals.
Yeah. There are definitely two types of stress, right? So there's acute stress and long-term stress. And that acute stress is maybe the stress of meeting deadlines at work, or your kids are just on your nerves, and, whatever that's in the moment stress. But then there's also that long-term stress that kind of just chugs along throughout your life. And then that could even be the oxidative stress that you're feeling within your body that's natural. But we definitely want to find solutions and strategies to minimizing that stress. And I always say this to my clients. I'll always recommend meditation, journaling, yoga, breath work. But listen, that's not for everyone. And I'll be honest, I teach fitness, I run, I do 1,000 things, but I'm not all about yoga. I can only do hip hop yoga because I can't really get out of my brain. So yoga is not going to work for me to release stress. Journaling sometimes works, but you've got to find what works for you. So for me, you have to let it out. That's whatever it is. So for me, I like to get in the shower and I have a hefty cry. I am not above it. I let it out in a very hot shower and I cry. And then I say a prayer. It's normally 10 minutes. And then I get up and I go, okay, that happened. Now let's move on. But that works for me. Journaling doesn't work for me. Sometimes I'll go for a 5-mile run and I'll just throw on, whatever. And that works for me. So you have to find what works for you, but you do need to do something. And right now, specifically mental health, it's important that we acknowledge that there's some depression happening in the Black community. And it was taboo for a really long time to say, hey, I'm depressed, or I'm having these feelings, or I don't really like my husband today, or don't really like my kids today, or I don't really like myself today. And so we're finding, especially now with Black Lives Matter and COVID, it's this kind of awareness like, hey, it's not a stigma anymore to be having some mental health issues right now. So if you're out there and you're watching this, and if you're having some of those things going on, I encourage you to check out Therapy for Black Girls. It's been a saving grace for me and a lot of people that I know. Dr. Joy is great, and their website will tell you where you can find resources in your area, therapists in your area, for you to talk to somebody about what's going on. So yes, it's self-care, but it's also mental health. And lastly, I will say, having community. So whether it's the community of your church group, the community of your family, friends, I know the pandemic has like ripped our communities apart, and it feels like we're so distant. So if it means, and you can have it, JL, have the wine and the popcorn, get on a
Thank
Zoom
you.
call with your friends, because food is not just like nourishment for your body. It's also just kind of, it tastes good and it feels good and it brings people together, and we know that in the Black community that it brings us together. So it's okay if that's how you're going to, reduce the stress by speaking with someone in that way. Then that's great. So those are really my tips, but find a strategy for yourself that works.
Good. Yeah, Kathy, I know there's a study about stress and metabolism. With that study, can you share some takeaways that we can use in this new climate that we're in?
Yeah, and I think before even the study, I think it's really good that there are some simple steps that people can take. Even taking the time for a deep breath sort of resets the nervous system. It allows the body to sort of start to relax. It disengages that fight or flight and allows it sort of be in that rest and digest. Laughter. I know it's hard during this time, but there is so much to be gained from laughter in terms of just lowering your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure. They've shown that it can lower blood sugar after you eat just from laughing. So there are some simple things. Taking that mindful walk where you just step out the door and just relax and walk. So there are those kinds of things. And then there's this a great study that really just looked at sort of taking that fast versus slow carbs. And so everybody was eating the same macronutrients, but whether the carbohydrate for the day was fast or slow, they were looking at, well, because you automatically assume, oh, that fast carb, that sugary drink is going to give me energy and make me feel better and everything. And well, what they found was the reverse. It actually led to more mood disturbance if you had the fast carbs versus the slow. It decreased energy. It made people feel more fatigued. So it just goes to show you that sometimes you've got to slow things down. And I think for so much of the health right now, take a breath, slow things down. As Stephanie said, even just eating slower can actually make you burn more calories, believe it or not. But it also just allows you to sort of de-stressify a little bit. And so there are these great just tricks that you can take that make a difference.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate all of the information that you guys have shared. So one final thought from both of you guys: what do you think it means to get to a place of health for Black women, for our community? What does that mean to you guys? And we'll close it out there.
Yeah, I think it's really just prioritizing health and knowing that it's important and involving our communities and not living in a place of shame if something's going on, and seeking support. And also just approaching our health from a place of prevention versus treatment. So when we talk about this younger population of 18 to 35, they should be in a place of prevention. And the more we can shift our generations and kind of create this legacy of health that's, positive health through our generations, that's going to make a huge impact. So for my parents, it was just eat what's in front of you because there may not be more tomorrow. But my parents were able to instill a little bit more nutrition in me, my brother, and my sister. And now I don't have kids, and neither does my brother, but my niece is, she's doing the cooking classes with me on Zoom and, learning about proper nutrition. And it's starting to shift from this kind of treatment into prevention. And I think just, starting that narrative with your own family and saying, how can we, prioritize our health and our wellness, and then extending that through our community, I'm sure we're going to see shifts, in no time to help decrease that risk of chronic disease that we're experiencing within the Black community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we have to pull in everybody, pull in the kids, pull in the older folks. I think it becomes sort of a family, neighborhood community. I think that's why Black Girls Run. That's why the Healthy Churches. It's so much a part of the movement that can happen to increase health. And I firmly believe it should be preventive. It needs to be one of these situations where it just becomes what you do. It's the complete natural aspect of health. Is just we are active. We do things in an active way that are going to help everyone. So that's
Awesome.
yeah.
Good, good, good. Well, thank you to our guests. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Dr. Kathy. Thank you for everyone tuning in to this great session provided by the Healthy Churches 2030 conference. I want to thank each of our guests for your passion and dedication to the health and wellness field. I know I could feel your energy, and I'm appreciative of you all sharing just your expertise and that passion and information with our Healthy Churches community. Information and knowing, like we said, is definitely the first step. So I hope today is a good next step of continuing the progress to get our communities healthier. Again, our speakers will be available for the next 15 minutes live to answer any questions that you may have burning as we prepare for this Thanksgiving holiday. I'm sure Stephanie can share some tips as well. So I want to thank you both again, and thank you to everyone tuning in, and have a great remaining Healthy Churches 2030 conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.